it is my pleasure to introduce to you someone who has stressed creativity in the classroom, has challenged the way we view education, and, as we at AMCO believe, and many, many teachers around the world also believe, is an inspiration to the entire educational community. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Ken Robinson. Good afternoon.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
The pleasure is ours. And on behalf of AMCO, I thank you for this opportunity to take time and speak with us here today, to hear your point of view, your ideas on different themes related to bilingualism and technology in the classroom. To begin with, you have been seen or reviewed as an educational provocateur. Why do you think this point of view has been taken? Why do you think you have been perceived in this way?
Yeah, it's hard to know, really. I think it's because I've spent most of my life trying to promote transformation in education. Mm-hmm. And it's provocative, I think, to people who want to maintain the status quo. And I think the status quo has to be challenged for the sake of our children and for the sake of our communities. So it's not that I'm setting out to be particularly provocative. I have to say I don't find my ideas provocative. I don't provoke myself at all, as much as I say. But but I don't think I provoke teachers.
Okay.
And my experience, as you said in the introduction, is that teachers, people who work in schools, people who work with students, understand what I'm saying. I think it's common sense. It's about finding individual talents. It's making education personal. It's about making proper use of technology. It's about individualizing education. And it's also framing that in a recognition that the world is changing faster than ever before. And our current systems of education were designed not for this century, and not even for the last one, but for the one before that, the 19th century. Mm-hmm. So if I am provocative on these subjects, it's only, I think, to people who don't see the need for fundamental change. And I think a lot of people in education do see that and see that I'm really trying to champion their cause.
When you think of a multi-competent profile, what comes to mind?
You're encouraging students or teachers to develop not just one particular set of skills, but a whole range of different skills and abilities. It seems it's very important just now, going back to what do students need for the 21st century. One of the great dangers, I think, in our current approach to standardizing education is that the inevitable consequence is that it's narrowing the curriculum. Aptitudes are, as I would describe them, are what are natural endowments. You know, the capacities we have at birth, and some we all have because we're human beings.
Yes.
And some we don't have because we're human beings. I mean, dogs are much better at certain things than we are. Mm-hmm. Bats are very good at certain things we're not. They're very good at echolocation, hanging upside down for months on end. Abilities are different. You may have aptitudes that you've never discovered, and you may have ones you know about but you've done nothing with. You've never developed them. We're all born, for example, with an aptitude to speak many languages.
Yes.
We are. If a child is brought up in a household where many languages are spoken, they will learn all of them. Mm-hmm. There's no natural limit, I don't think, but they'll just learn them. But if you're born in a household where one language is spoken, that's the one you learn, and then you struggle in your 20s to learn another one. Yeah. So our aptitudes don't always become abilities, and many of our aptitudes never develop because our schools ignore them, because they're obsessed with a certain type of competence. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that for the future we need to help students understand many more of their natural aptitudes and bring them to competence in them. And the more competent they are in more areas, the more likely they are, I think, to have lives that are personally productive, and the more likely they are to be able to make a productive contribution to the world around them.
Okay. Along those lines, when I say total learning environment, what comes to mind?
An environment which is stimulating to students, where they learn from each other, where there's a sense of possibility, where there are many different avenues for learning and for exploration. You know, the whole range of our senses are given the possibility of expression, which is visually stimulating, where there is music, where there's an opportunity to move, there's an opportunity to work with people. A lot of our environments shut down all kinds of options. Sitting kids in desks for hours on end shuts them down. But it's one where a total learning environment is one where students have opportunities to learn through many different media and modes, and which excites their interest in learning rather than suppresses it.
All right. When you think of a brilliant student, a brilliant child, what comes to mind?
Well, brilliance is a sense of radiance and of energy, and of something that both gives out energy and reflects energy. And I believe it very strongly that all children are born with immense creative energy and with a kind of power of personal transformation and a vast curiosity about the world around them. I sometimes see, that children go into school at a young age with tremendous enthusiasm, their eyes shining, and often you see the light starting to go out from them, their energy starts to dim.
Definitely.
And it's because of the environment, I think. It's because of the ways they're expected to behave, the ways that their energies are curtailed and shut down. And I don't mean we should give children free rein. I think we all need structure and we need support and help and guidance. But you would hope over the course of their education that light would shine more brightly. It wouldn't dim. They'd come out feeling even more energetic. They'd feel even more curious. They'd feel even more empowered to carry on learning. And that, to me, would constitute a powerful education, a strong education, if children come out not dimmed by the experience, but fired by the experience, if their light is shining brighter.
In the classroom, what should a teacher's role be, and what skills are needed by the teacher in order to be successful, in order to have a successful class?
Teaching isn't just a process of downloading information. It's really a question of stimulating imagination and inquiry.
Okay.
So finding creative ways into material, finding ways of introducing it so kids find it engaging and interesting, and then also being able to have a nuanced approach to individuals in the room and how they work best and how they think best, is at the heart of great teaching. Very often I think it happens that people are trained on the assumption if they just know their material and they know the standards and the curriculum, their job is to transmit it. And my view is that's not their role at all. It's to facilitate learning. I say the profession isn't about teaching, it's about learning. And knowing how to engage people in the material is more than half the job.
Okay. In that, you mentioned the way we're teaching towards the 19th century. Let's take it another step further. If a student starting school today in first grade, since we don't know what the future will hold, since we can't predict what's going to happen, what tools, what skills, what can we help that student learn, or what will they need for the year 2024 when they graduate high school and beyond?
One of the purposes of education, as I see it, is to enable students to understand what lies within them.
Okay.
And my conviction has always been that we're born with immense natural talents. Everybody is. If you're a human being, it comes with a kit. We think in all sorts of different ways. That's the whole idea behind Howard Gardner's arguments for multiple intelligences. Yes. We don't just think in words or numbers, although we do think in those ways, but we think visually, we think in movement, we think in sound, we think kinesthetically. To be a human being is to be a repository of immense, diverse talents. And many people never discover what their talents are. So one of the best ways we can enable our students to face the world around them is to understand the world within them.
Okay.
But we also have to enable them to understand the world around them. And that's a cultural process. It's about learning to communicate with other people, understand other people's points of view. And the mission, as I see it, for education now has to take account of how this world around them is really changing fundamentally. These are among the core skills that students now need. They need to be creative, they need to be able to communicate, they need to be able to work in teams, they need to be culturally literate, and they need to have an ability to respond to other people's points of view and to empathize. It's why there's so much talk these days properly about emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. And a lot of our traditional forms of education have simply been aiming to fill students up with factual knowledge about this world outside, but the world is changing too quickly for that to serve them very well for very long.
How do we integrate technology, which is now a part of every student's life? Students have it, parents have it. How do we integrate that into the classroom and still meet those needs without it taking over?
Tools have always been a part of the evolution of human culture. And what we now have is a whole new generation of digital tools. What tends to happen, I think, is that institutions always lag behind the leading edge of technology, because it takes a generation of teachers a while to get the hang of these new tools. Meanwhile, our children are living with these new tools. They don't even think they're tools. I mean, they don't think of computers or cell phones as some fancy evolutionary development. They're just utilities. Somebody once said this. They said that technology is not technology if it happened before you were born. So I see them as integral to education. We should see their power and potential. But like all tools, they don't replace good education, they enhance it. When I always think, for example, musical instruments are tools. Mm-hmm. You could go into a musical, a cupboard of musical instruments, and it's full of tools. A trombone is a tool, a guitar is a tool. But a room full of instruments doesn't make any music. They need musicians.
They need to be in the correct hands.
Yes, that's right. You need musicians who can, a box of paints doesn't produce a wonderful painting, a painter might. And I feel it's with these tools. Word processors don't produce great novels, but a writer might with them. And great technologies don't produce great education, but great educators could. And I think part of the answer here is that we need to engage our children in designing their own learning programs collaboratively with the teachers, because the teachers may know many things that our kids need to understand, but our children often have a much better grasp of the learning potential of the tools that they have in their hands because they're used to them. They're more intuitive. Mm-hmm. Alongside that, we need to help teachers understand them by giving them tools which are directed to educational purposes, so they can begin to see how these tools can be used more effectively, because they may of themselves not really have had the time to find out.
So then, along those lines, how is technology helping to maximize, or how can technology help maximize the time in class without minimizing the role of the teacher?
Is to radically individualize education. Mm-hmm. I think that what the new technologies offer, and we call them new, they've been around for quite a long time, but they're evolving very quickly, but they also give the opportunity to have children and students learn at their own rate much more. You can have personalized programs. There can be portfolios that they're operating on. They can be moving between projects. Teaching entails learning. And that's what we should be concerned about. It's not so much teaching that is the focus of education, it's learning.
The learning side.
And teaching is a process of enabling learning to happen. It's not just a process of teachers kind of downloading what's in their mind. Mm-hmm. It's about trying to stimulate what's in the students' minds. And the technologies provide a whole battery and array of new techniques and possibilities for doing that, including, say, the radical personalization of education. And why that matters, I think, is that education in the end is personal. It's about people.
Most definitely.
And all children learn differently. We may want them to learn similar things, but they'll learn them differently. So people do pick different things up, and a lot of kids disengage from education because it doesn't speak to them. Mm-hmm. And I would never see the digital technologies as the whole answer to education. They don't replace education, they enhance it.
Okay.
And in the right hands, like a great instrument, they can produce wonderful music.
What can we do to help remedy this so that content is not limited to the internet?
There are other ways, as you know, of accessing it, of working offline. I know that's part of the system that you have and promote, and I think that makes good sense, because it's a way of not being over-dependent mm-hmm. on the technology, but of kind of capturing what the technology has available at any given time. And it also seems to me that it contributes to something I think is very important to the heart of education, which is collaboration. We often teach children in isolated units. I mean, they're in classrooms. We teach them in groups, but not as groups. They're groups, they're kind of individuals isolated. And what we can do with these tools now is to connect people and have them work collaboratively. And that's really how innovation and creativity most often flourish, by rubbing up against the ideas of other people, being stimulated by them and adding to them and contributing to them.
Okay. How do you feel our AMCO's platform, AMCO's methodology, will help meet or help resolve some of these challenges that we've talked about so far?
Well, what you have in the system, as I'm coming to understand it, is firstly a genuine attempt to integrate disciplines and to show connections between them, to show how one field of work can influence and affect another. The immersion approach you have to language, I think, is absolutely based on the right principles. That
is our foundation. Definitely.
Yes, I think it's absolutely vitally important that you learn the language by speaking it and by trying to live it and to breathe it, rather than trying to learn it by osmosis through another language. It's what I'm saying, really. If you want to do something, do that. Yeah, don't do something that's like it. Do that. So I think the immersion in language is absolutely the right and proper approach to this. And also the ways in which you're integrating technology itself, the new digital technologies, within the process of teaching and learning, within pedagogy, giving children their own personal interfaces, but also giving teachers a way that they can communicate with them collectively or individually. And I think what you're also doing here is for teachers who are uneasy or unfamiliar with digital technologies, you're giving them a platform and a series of scaffoldings as well to give them some confidence and security in the techniques and support. Literally that, some support, so they're not just feeling they're floundering around in open space, but they've got some footholds here, some techniques they can use, which will give them the confidence to develop more skills of their own. So to me, that it's an approach that's not just intended to provide some structure for the student, it's also giving, I think, a very helpful structure to the teachers themselves. And of course, like any learner, and the teachers themselves are learners, I mean, good teachers are always learning. What you're giving them is a system which, as I see it, they can improve on, add to, elaborate as they become more confident.
We definitely do. We definitely do elaborate. We definitely do evolve year by year, and in some cases month by month. But if you could give one message to them, one suggestion to those teachers who will be watching this today, what is one thing you would like to say to those teachers within our system?
I always do want to say to teachers that they're doing the most important work. The ability to help stimulate the minds of children and their capacities for learning it really sits at the heart of our cultures and our civilizations. H.G. Wells, the famous science fiction writer, once said that civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. And it's a rather dramatic way to put it, but education is a process of personal empowerment, and it's a process of cultural growth and development. It's why we invest so strongly in it. It sits at the heart of our economic aspirations. And those three areas, economic development, cultural development, and personal development, aren't necessarily at odds with each other. In the best education systems, they are fully complementary. But it all comes down to the talents and the passions of teaching. The influence of teachers is enormous. Their contribution is enormous, and I think it's one of the most important jobs people can do if they love to do it and they do it well. And it's easy for teachers to forget that, I think, in the current pressures to standardize and to politicize education. But at the heart of it, I think, is one of the most important roles anybody can take on, and the profession itself is one of the most honourable that people can become part of. And I always want to encourage people to value themselves as much as they value their own students.
I can't thank you enough for your time. This has been fantastic. Everything you have said to me today, to us today, has been enlightening, to say the least. Has been just a very, very special hour that we've been able to spend with you here today. And Sir Ken Robinson, on behalf of AMCO,
thank you so much.
We thank you very much for your time.
A great pleasure, thank you.